We're preparing the next generation for when we go. I think that's been incredibly successful. You'll recall there was a coup against Jeremy and we had all of our shadow cabinet resign, which was quite exciting.
British politics is in disarray. Trust in the people who represent us has never been so low, and many don't even know who their MP is. I've been travelling the country, meeting politicians outside Westminster, getting under their skin, finding out what motivates them, and how they're going to fix the problems we are all facing. John McDonnell is the Labour MP for Hayes and Harlington and Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, which doesn't leave a lot of free time for hobbies. It's a round-the-clock job, so I met him where he's preparing for power.
Right.
So John, we are in your constituency office. How much time do you get to spend here on an average week?
I tell you, it's a struggle. It's a struggle balancing up the parliamentary and the constituency work. So I'm spending 3 days a week here, weekends, Fridays, Monday mornings, that sort of thing. I literally have a saint who runs my office, a woman called Helen Loader. She just works herself into the ground, won't take time off. I do everything I possibly can to persuade her to. But you'll find the door is going continuously. We're dealing with some of the social problems I've never experienced it. I've lived here 40 years. I've represented for over 20. Never seen anything as bad as this. And it all falls on Helen and my team. And they're fantastic. They're just fantastic.
Would it be fair to say you almost feel as if it's at crisis point then?
Oh, it's gone beyond that. As I say, I've lived here 40 years. We're a really strong community, multicultural, working class. But we've never seen anything as bad as this. Homelessness on a scale we've not seen ever. Overcrowding. And we've got this beds in sheds phenomenon, where families are living in sheds and garages rented out to them. Helen has been dealing just before Christmas with families who are living in vans in the area. That's how bad it is. Our food banks are overflowing at the moment because of people not having their benefits delayed. Universal credit is just being introduced in this area. Sanctions, particularly the people who are affected the most seem to be those with mental health problems who can't cope with the system. People come to me when we're the last resort. They've tried everything else and they're desperate. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking.
You've had several interesting jobs, this being one of them, but I'd like, if we could, first to visit some of your earliest memories growing up in Liverpool in the 1950s. What do you remember about that time?
My dad was on the docks, my mum was a cleaner. We lived with my granny, we were all lived in there. In what now is described as a slum, I joke about it, but actually it was just home, everyone was in the same boat. And looking back on it now, I have a sense of pride about Liverpool itself. That's where I was born. I have a sense of pride about the community because I was a very strong community. But clearly people were living in the most insecure conditions. I'll just give an example. In the old days on the docks, when my grandfather and my dad started out on the docks, you'd turn up for work and you'd stand in the street and you'd be chosen by a gangmaster. And if you weren't chosen, you didn't work that day and you didn't get any wages. It was like a zero-hour contracts back in the 1930s and 40s and 50s. So that sort of insecurity lent itself to people living on low wages in some of the most appalling housing conditions. And at the same time, I suppose as well, at the same time in what we would construe now as real poverty. I never went without anything because my mum and dad always worked, etc., as best they could. But if you look back on it, it must have been really tough for them. So the whole experience of a Labour government after the Second World War, providing decent housing. We moved out into a prefab, a council prefab, and then a council house. Day of celebration, you know. My brother and I, we had our own bedrooms for the first time. We had a garden back in the rear. Parker Morris standards they had then, decent housing. And trade union rights then were established properly under a Labour government. So my dad became a branch secretary of the T&G, Transport General Workers Union, negotiated. Yeah, there were strikes, but you negotiated through collective bargaining and you lifted the income that people had. Free education. I went to university, I went on the shop floor when I left school, but I went to university, I went on a grant, no tuition fees. You always saw that life was going to improve for you and the next generation. And that's the problem that we've got now. It's gone backwards. That commitment that the next generation will always have a better existence than yourselves because you're working towards that, that's not happening anymore. We've gone backwards rather than forwards.
You received a Catholic education. You're from an Irish Catholic background. For a period of time, you're actually looking at becoming a priest. Are you still religious now?
No. I respect people who have the faith, I really do. But no, I came from an Irish Catholic background, grew up within it, Mass every Sunday, benediction twice a week, that sort of thing. And then in the traditional Irish family, someone is identified as going into the religious orders of some sort. And I thought I did have a vocation. And I went to state schools, but then I went off to a De La Salle boarding school in preparation for a seminary. But around about the age of 16, I decided I didn't have a vocation. And then later decided, no, I didn't have a religious commitment in that sense. But I respect other people who do. And in this, what's interesting, in this community now, we're a multicultural community. So across the road is the mosque. I actually helped found the mosque because they couldn't find premises originally. This is 20 years ago. We have a strong Sikh community. There is a strong Catholic community. It's interesting, the Catholic community is no longer dominated by the Irish as they were before, but there's a large Goan presence and others. And we have others of no faith whatsoever. There's a small Jewish community in the north of Hillingdon as well. So again, what I've been trying to do, and I hold functions where I bring all the religious leaders together to talk about what's happening within our community and what role they're playing. And when there's a crisis in this local community and I put out an appeal, they always come forward. On a multi-faith basis, they always come forward to assist us.
You touched on vocation there. You worked in a children's care home in the 1970s. You were responsible for 10 children. What was that like?
Tough. No, I loved it. I enjoyed it. What happened was that when I left school, I went on the shop floor. I got married. My then wife said, "Look, you need to sort yourself out and go back to college." So I did A-levels at night school again at Burnley Tech College. Again, it's interesting the way further education has cut back. A lot of people have been denied that opportunity. Now I had that opportunity. Did my A-levels at night school in a year and then applied for university. And I applied for Brunel University down here because it was a sandwich course and you could work for 6 months and study for 6 months. And then we moved down and I was married then, we were looking for accommodation. And the local authority was recruiting house parents for children's homes, family unit children's homes, where it was a fairly sexist traditional model where the wife would be the house mother and you'd be the house father. My then wife was a qualified nursery nurse, so she would do the job full-time, I would do it part-time and then work full-time in the summer. And we looked after, 10 kids. I was 23, 24, it was quite a bit of a shocker. And these children were all kids who'd been brought into care, largely because of family breakdown, mental health problems within the family often, or sometimes abuse. And they would move from location to location, placement of placement. Sometimes the children we'd have brought to us would have been in half a dozen locations already at a very young age.
It must have been enormously challenging as a young man to be placed in that situation.
Yeah, it was. And looking back on it now, you look back on it, I look about it now with a sense of it, just excitement really. So we tried to live just like a normal family. And we'd go everywhere, I'd take them everywhere together. We'd go on holiday, we'd go to my mum's place up in Norfolk, and we'd get a council van and we'd trail around Scotland, went to Skye and we'd be camping and all that sort of thing. But we tried to give the children as normal life as we possibly could, but also trying to build the relationships with their families as well. So that meant a relationship with the families. We had a good team of staff, and at that time as well, we were given support in terms of training, but we were also given support from local psychologists and others. So there was a whole network of support for us, which I think proved pretty successful. But a lot of the so I've kept in touch with quite a few of the children we looked after at the time who've now grown up, but it would have been tough for them. Their life experiences were pretty tough. I'm hoping we helped them come through it.
The reason why I'm discussing this earlier period of your life is because I'm trying to identify when or what it was specifically that made you political.
My image of childhood is standing beside my mum as we're doing the washing up and I'm drying up or something like that, and we're talking continuously. The news is always on. I'm helping my dad collect these subs from his members, doing the books for the T&G branch, that sort of thing. So it's always there. And remember in the 1960s, people don't recall it now, but there's Pope John the 23rd, who was quite a radical pope who changed the atmosphere within Catholicism itself, more about confronting the real world, and you had things like worker priests, etc. So that whole combination in my youth of what was happening in terms of the trade union movement, my father, the politics of my mother, about a wider assessment of society and those issues and discussion all the time, and then yes, also the religious background as well in terms of what was happening in the Catholic Church then.
Let's move on to more explicitly political matters now. Jeremy Corbyn's leadership of the Labour Party isn't eternal. Could you see yourself standing again in a Labour leadership contest?
No. I joke about it, but it's true. 5 years ago, I'd had a heart attack, minor one, and the NHS were fantastic and sorted it out for me really well. And I was in my 60s, so I was looking forward to a quiet retirement, drift into retirement after all these years on the back benches. And I joke about it, it's true, I was looking forward to, sitting back at the back of the hall, moaning about how it all gone wrong because no one had listened to me, sort of thing, And then along comes Jeremy, and all of a sudden we're running a leadership election campaign. And then within the first month of that leadership election campaign, you realise actually we're most probably going to win it here. So that then thrust us into fairly prominent positions about how we develop policy, how do we mobilise a party, how do we build a party, and how do we get into government. So that's my focus now. But what we're also doing, and people need to be aware of this, we're preparing the next generation for when we go. And I think that's been incredibly successful. You'll recall, there was a coup against Jeremy, and we had all of our shadow cabinet resign, which was quite exciting. So we thought, well, let's use this opportunity to bring forward the next generation. And we did. So our shadow cabinet now comprises largely that new generation, and they're terrific, absolutely terrific. You've got people like Rebecca Long-Bailey up in Salford, who's our industry secretary, fantastic, young lawyer, absolutely brilliant, working class background. Richard Bergen, exactly the same. Angie Rayner, Emily Thornby, that whole team. You can see how actually having been brought forward and facing a real challenge to become all of a sudden on that front bench a member of a cabinet, how they've risen to it really well. So I'm confident now that whatever happens to me and Jeremy in the future, we've got the new generation to take us forward.
And in that next generation of Labour frontbenchers, is there anyone that stands out to you in particular as a successor to Jeremy?
I've been saying the next Labour leader needs to be a woman, and we need to ensure that happens, just in terms of making sure that we get that gender balance right for the future. And you can see there's a whole range of people there that could step up to the job.
There's a lot of young people sat on the sidelines watching the Conservative government flounder in the way that it's handling Brexit, and a lot of those young people are overwhelmingly Remain. What's your message to them? What do you say to them? What's Labour going to do differently?
The one key principle that Jeremy was elected upon is that we're going to be a democratic party from here on in, absolutely democratic, so our members will take decisions and will consult, etc. So we're abiding by the decision our members took at Labour Party conference. But the other issue as well is, apart from abiding by the democratic decisions of our party at conference, we've also got to get to a situation to bring people back together again. I've been doing every other Saturday for a number of months now. I've been doing these economic conferences in what we call town meetings. So a lot of these meetings have been up north, places like Blackpool, Pudsey, those sort of places. Many of the places that voted leave. We've been going along to talk about the local economy, but also to talk about the future. And you test the water on that. And there are areas still that feel extremely strongly in support of leave.
What are the economic consequences for the manner in which we're going about withdrawing from the European Union?
If you look at the range of options, the no-deal option that some of the Conservatives are promoting, I think genuinely accepted would be catastrophic. We've already seen the assessments from the Treasury, the Bank of England, etc., about the way in which the GDP growth will decline.
Is there potential for the manner in which the Conservative Party is handling Brexit for the UK to experience a recession?
I've been talking to people like the CBI, I've been talking to the TUC, so both sides of industry. They're all saying the impact upon the economy will mean that people's living standards will be directly impacted upon, their livelihoods will be threatened, and we will lose jobs. Well, I think MPs begin to wake up to the fact that Theresa May's deal and the no deal is just completely unacceptable. That's why you're seeing on a cross-party basis MPs working together, either to get the best deal we can, or then to say, well, let's go back to the people.
Perfect. John, thanks for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Great.
Cheers.